The morning I found a stranger's king-size bedsheet stretched across my backyard fence. I stood there holding a cup of coffee and honestly wondered if I had somehow missed a neighborhood meeting where everyone decided my property was now public equipment. I'm not kidding. That sheet wasn't caught there by the wind. It wasn't tangled. It wasn't halfway hanging. It was clipped neatly across two fence panels, pulled tight like somebody had taken pride in the setup. And standing there in my bathrobe at 7 in the morning, staring at somebody else's laundry fluttering over my vegetable garden, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. Something that said, this isn't actually about laundry anymore. My name's Ryan Bennett. I'm 43 years old, divorced, and I live in a small neighborhood outside Lexington, Kentucky. Nothing fancy. Just a row of modest homes where everybody knows enough about each other to wave, but not enough to borrow money. I've always liked it that way. I'm the kind of guy who enjoys routine. Saturday mornings mean mowing the lawn. Sunday afternoons mean grilling something on the back patio. Most evenings after work, you'll find me sitting outside with a drink listening to baseball on the radio. Simple life. At least it was. The family behind me moved in about 2 years earlier. The Garcias. Good people as far as I could tell. Loud sometimes, but good people. 3 kids, a grandmother, 2 barking dogs, and enough daily activity to make their backyard look like a county fair. Meanwhile, my backyard was quiet. A few tomato plants, some herbs, a couple patio chairs. The fence between us wasn't especially tall, but it was enough to create the illusion that we each had our own little world. For a while, everything was fine. Then the shirts started appearing. The first one was gray. I remember that because I actually laughed when I saw it hanging over the fence. I figured the wind had carried it there. No big deal. I tossed it back. Problem solved. A few days later, it was a towel, then a pair of socks, then a kid's sweatshirt. Every time I found something, I simply returned it. No complaints. No drama. But after a few weeks, something began to bother me. Not the clothes themselves. The pattern. The items weren't landing randomly. They kept showing up in the exact same place. Always near the center section of the fence. Always arranged in a way that looked intentional. One afternoon, my friend Derek stopped by to watch a football game. We were carrying drinks out to the patio when he pointed toward the fence. "Ryan," he said, "you starting a side hustle as a laundromat?" A bright red towel was hanging there, right in the middle. I laughed, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. But after he left, I sat outside alone and looked at that fence for a long time, because suddenly I couldn't stop seeing it. Every shirt, every towel, every sock. The thing about boundaries is that most people don't notice them until somebody crosses one. And when they do, it's hard to ignore. A week later, I started paying closer attention. That's when I noticed something interesting. The Garcias had one clothesline. Just one. And it was overloaded almost every day. Meanwhile, my fence happened to sit in the perfect spot. Full afternoon sunlight. Steady breeze. Flat top rail. Practically custom built for drying laundry. Once I saw that, everything started making sense. The clothes weren't accidentally ending up there. My fence was being used. Not officially. Not openly. Just little by little. One shirt at a time. And maybe if it had stopped there, I would have ignored it forever. Maybe. But then came the bedsheet. The one that changed everything. The one that was stretched tight across my fence like somebody had planted a flag. I stood there staring at it while my coffee went cold. And for the first time, I stopped asking whether it was an accident. Instead, I found myself wondering something else. What happens when somebody gets comfortable taking a little bit of your space, and you never tell them to stop? That afternoon, I finally decided I was going to talk to my neighbor. Not argue. Not fight. Just talk. Because at that point, I still believed this was a misunderstanding. I still believed one simple conversation could fix everything. Looking back now, that's probably the funniest part of the whole story, because I had absolutely no idea what was coming next. The conversation happened the next afternoon. I caught my neighbor, Victor Garcia, while he was dragging a laundry basket across his yard. One of his boys was chasing a soccer ball, his youngest daughter was drawing with sidewalk chalk, and somewhere in the background, one of the dogs was barking like it had a personal issue with gravity. Normal afternoon. Normal people. Which is probably why I walked into the conversation expecting a normal outcome. "Hey, Victor," I called over the fence. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, Ryan." I pointed toward the bedsheet that had been there that morning. "I've been noticing some laundry ending up on my side lately." His expression didn't change. Not even a little. "Oh yeah," he said casually. "Sometimes stuff spills over." Spills over. That phrase landed strangely. Because shirts spill over. Maybe a towel spills over. A king-size bedsheet clipped across somebody else's fence doesn't spill over. It relocates. Still, I nodded. "Gotcha. Just wanted to mention it." "No problem." And that was it. At least on the surface. I walked back inside, believing things would improve. For about a week, they actually did. Nothing appeared on the fence. No shirts. No socks. No towels. The whole thing almost felt silly. Like I'd built a problem bigger in my head than it really was. One Saturday morning, I was trimming some bushes near the property line when I caught myself admiring how clean everything looked. Just wood. Sunlight. Open space. Exactly how it should be. Then came Monday. I stepped outside before work and immediately stopped walking. 3 shirts. Not one. 3. Hanging neatly across the center section of the fence. And this time there was something new. Bright green clothespins. I stared at them for several seconds. Because unlike a shirt, a clothespin can't accidentally migrate. A clothespin requires a decision. Somebody had physically reached over the fence. Somebody had clipped those shirts into place. Somebody had looked directly at my property and thought, "Yeah, this works for me." That realization hit differently. I removed the clothes, unclipped every pin, folded everything neatly, placed it back over the fence. No drama, no jilling. But inside, my patience was starting to wear thin. Over the next couple weeks, it became almost predictable. Every morning felt like opening a mystery box. Some days it was towels. Some days it was kids' clothes. Once it was what looked like an entire set of pillowcases. I started finding myself checking the fence before I even looked at my garden. And that's when I realized something important. The laundry wasn't the problem anymore. The anticipation was. The constant expectation. The feeling that somebody else had partial ownership of a space that belonged to me. One evening I called my older sister, Melissa. She lives in Montana on 5 acres of land. 5 acres. Her nearest neighbor is far enough away that she probably needs binoculars to borrow sugar. After listening to my story, she laughed so hard I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Ryan, are you seriously being bullied by laundry?" "That's not what's happening." "It kind of sounds like what's happening." I sighed. "You're missing the point." "No, I get the point. They're ignoring your boundary." "Exactly." "Then tell them." Easy for her to say. She wasn't the one who had to live 20 feet away from the consequences. People always talk about confrontation like it's simple. It isn't. Not when the person lives right behind you. Not when you'll see them every weekend. Not when every awkward interaction gets replayed over and over for years. I didn't want a feud. I didn't want resentment. I wanted normal. So instead of confronting Victor again, I tried something else. Something neutral. The following weekend, I drove to a hardware store across town. The kind of place where every employee looks like they can build a cabin from memory. I bought a small weatherproof sign. Nothing rude. Nothing aggressive. Just simple black letters on white plastic. "Please do not hang items on fence." That was it. Clear. Polite. Impossible to misunderstand. I attached it directly to the center section where most of the laundry appeared. Then I went back inside and waited. The result was immediate. For an entire week, the fence remained empty. No shirts, no towels, no misteri fabric, nothing. And honestly, I felt relieved. Not victorious. Relieved. Because conflict is exhausting even when nobody's speaking. I remember sitting on my patio one evening watching the sunset and thinking maybe this was how adulthood was supposed to work. A problem appears. You communicate clearly. People adjust. Life moves on. Turns out I was giving reality way too much credit. The following Thursday, I came home from work exhausted. Long day. Bad traffic. Meeting that should have been an email. You know the type. I loosened my tie, grabbed a drink, and stepped into the backyard. Then I froze. There it was. Another bedsheet. Light blue this time. Stretched across my fence. Clipped tightly in place. The sign was less than 2 feet away. Fully visible. Impossible to miss. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, Because it was absurd. The sign had transformed the entire situation. Before, there was room for misunderstanding. Now there wasn't. Somebody had seen my boundary and chosen convenience anyway. And that realization changed something inside me. I wasn't angry at Victor, at least not entirely. The truth was more complicated. I understood his situation. Big family, small yard, limited space. I got it. What bothered me was the assumption, the idea that his problem automatically became my responsibility, that my property existed as a solution waiting to be used, that my comfort mattered less than his convenience. I stood there staring at that bedsheet as it moved gently in the evening breeze. And for the first time, I stopped thinking about conversations. I stopped thinking about signs. I stopped thinking about changing Victor's behavior, because clearly that wasn't working. Instead, I started thinking about something else. The fence itself. Why was it so easy to use? Why did this keep happening? The answer was obvious once I looked at it objectively. Flat top rail. Perfect height. Easy access. The fence wasn't just a boundary. It was functional equipment. Useful equipment. And as long as it stayed useful, people would keep using it. Not because they were evil, because it worked. I walked over and ran my hand along the top edge. Smooth wood, wide enough for clothespins, strong enough to hold weight, practical. And right there, standing alone in my backyard with somebody else's bedsheet hanging in front of me, an idea quietly began forming. Not revenge, not confrontation, something better, something cleaner, a solution that wouldn't require permission, wouldn't require another conversation, wouldn't require anybody admitting they were wrong. A solution that relied on one simple principle. If the fence stopped being useful, the behavior would stop with it. And once that thought entered my head, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Because suddenly I wasn't looking at a neighbor problem anymore. I was looking at a design problem. And design problems have solutions. The only question was whether I was willing to follow through. By the next morning, I already knew the answer. The next Saturday morning, I drove back to the hardware store. By then I wasn't angry. Honestly, that's what made the whole thing work. Anger usually wants a witness. This didn't. This was just problem solving. The same older employee was there when I walked in. He asked if I needed help finding anything. I told him I wanted something that would protect the top of a wooden fence from weather damage, which was technically true. He nodded and led me toward a display of vinyl fence caps and toppers. Most of them were decorative. A few were practical. Then I saw it. A smooth, rounded fence cap designed to sit directly over the flat top rail. Simple, clean, curved, no flat surface, no grip, no place for a clothespin to hold. I ran my fingers across it and immediately smiled. The employee probably thought I was unusually excited about fencing materials. He wasn't entirely wrong. That afternoon, I installed the topper across the shared section of fence. Nothing dramatic, just measuring, drilling, securing everything into place. A couple hours of work. When I finished, the fence actually looked better than before. More polished, more complete, like it had always belonged there. But the real change wasn't visual. The real change was functional. The fence was no longer useful as a clothesline. And that was the entire point. The following morning, I walked outside with my coffee. The fence was empty. The garden looked peaceful. For the first time in months, I wasn't scanning for shirts or towels. I was just enjoying my backyard. Then, later that afternoon, I heard activity on the other side. Kids laughing. Dogs barking. The usual soundtrack. A few minutes later, I noticed movement near the fence. A hand appeared, then a shirt. I tried not to laugh. The shirt was lifted carefully over the fence. A clothespin reached for the top rail. There was a brief pause. Then the clothespin slipped. The shirt slid downward and disappeared back onto Victor's side. I took a sip of coffee. A few seconds later, another attempt. Different angle. More pressure. Same result. Slip. Drop. Gone. It was almost beautiful. Not because somebody was failing. Because nobody was fighting. Gravity was doing all the work. Over the next several days, I witnessed variations of the same scene. A towel. A pair of jeans. A child's superhero shirt. Every attempt ended the same way. The fabric would hang there for a second, almost hopeful, then slowly slide off and vanish. Each time, the attempts became shorter, less confident, more reluctant. like someone repeatedly trying a door that no longer opened. Then one day they stopped. Completely. No more laundry. No more clothespins. No more bed sheets. Nothing. The fence returned to being what it was originally designed to be. A boundary. A few weeks later, I was watering my tomato plants when Victor appeared in his backyard. It was one of those accidental overlaps where neither person could really avoid the other. He glanced toward the fence, then back at me. "Hey, Ryan." "Hey." He pointed toward the topper. "You do something to that fence?" I knew immediately what he meant. I also knew this was the moment where I could finally unload everything. The conversations, the sign, the frustration, the months of feeling ignored. I could have listed every single thing. I could have turned it into a speech. Instead, I looked at the fence and shrugged. "Yeah, added a weather cap." He nodded. "Our stuff keeps sliding off now." There was a brief silence, the kind where both people understand more than they're saying. Then he scratched the back of his neck. "We'll probably put up another clothesline. That might help." Another pause. Then something happened I genuinely didn't expect. Victor laughed. Not awkwardly, not sarcastically, just laughed. "Guess we got a little too comfortable using your fence." There it was, the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. And strangely enough, it was enough. I smiled. "Maybe a little." He nodded. "Fair." Then he walked away. No argument, no resentment, no dramatic showdown. Just two grown men acknowledging reality. About a week later, I noticed a second clothesline in their yard. Higher, longer, better positioned. The laundry problem disappeared permanently. Life moved on. The kids still played outside. The dog still barked. Victor still waved whenever he saw me. And every now and then we'd even talk about football or yard work like none of it had ever happened. But here's the part that stayed with me. The part one still think about. I never actually told him how much it bothered me. Not really. I never explained the frustration. I never described what it felt like watching someone repeatedly ignore a boundary I try to set politely. Instead, I changed the environment. I changed the conditions. And the behavior changed with it. Part of me thinks that was the smartest solution. No drama. No hostility. No neighborhood war. Just a practical fix. But another part of me wonders if I took the easy way out. Maybe a more direct conversation would have built more understanding. Maybe it would have strengthened the relationship. Or maybe it would have created resentment that lasted for years. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that every morning now, when I walk outside with my coffee, I see exactly what I expect to see. My garden, my fence, my backyard. Nothing more, nothing less. And sometimes that's enough. But I'm curious what you think. If you were in my position, would you have handled it the same way? Would you have quietly solved the problem without another word? Or would you have confronted Victor directly and forced the issue into the open? Was the fence topper a smart solution? Or just a polite way of avoiding an uncomfortable conversation? Let me know down in the comments because I can honestly see both sides. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who slowly pushed a boundary until it became impossible to ignore, I'd love to hear that story too. If you enjoyed this one, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who appreciates a little quiet justice. I'll see you in the next story.